Well, Pitt basketball made it to late November before they had a player miss time or get hurt or get in trouble. Fortunately, not in trouble. I mean, you don't want to say it's fortunate that you don't want to say it's fortunate that anyone got hurt, but it's certainly better than getting in trouble. And so there's that, I guess, if you're looking for any upside to the news this week about Damian Dunn. Surgery on his thumb after suffering an injury against Wisconsin on Sunday. Sort of a double whammy on Sunday. Dunn had to leave that game after injuring his ankle and injuring his thumb. Turns out the thumb was more serious than the ankle. He had to have surgery, and Pitt announced on Monday that Dunn will be out for 6 weeks. That's quite a bit of time to be without a guy who was one of the top scorers. He was a starting guard and a pretty important piece, a veteran piece of this team so far through his first 7 games. His loss, his absence on Sunday against Wisconsin certainly contributed to the Panthers' loss to the Badgers. It wasn't the only reason they lost. There were certainly a lot of factors that went into it. Wisconsin having a guy go off for 30 points being among them, and Pitt being in a good deal of foul trouble was also a significant element in that defeat. But the loss of Damian Dunn certainly played a factor as well. So what's the fallout from Damian Dunn's injury? What is Pitt going to do without Damian Dunn? Who sees their minutes increase? Who's going to be counted on for more offense? Who's going to be counted on for more defense? Because Damian Dunn, pretty good at both ends of the court, maybe a little better even defensively than it is offensively, and he's pretty good offensively. Who's going to fill in for Damian Dunn? Who's going to pick up the slack as Pitt moves through these next 6 weeks without the transfer guard from Houston? Let's break down what Pitt basketball looks like without Damian Dunn, at least for the next month and a half, here on today's Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So yeah, 6-week timetable for Damian Dunn after surgery on his right thumb. Pitt's official press release said at least 6 weeks, so we'll see if it ends up being right around that number or not. If it is exactly 6 weeks, Damian Dunn is looking at missing, potentially 7 games. And I guess if you want to look at a bright side, there are some gaps in the schedule here before they settle into the 2 games a week grind of the ACC. You've got the Christmas break coming up, the holiday break in general coming up, and so that's going to spread the games out a little bit. Of course, they're at Ohio State, at Mississippi State, at Virginia Tech. This, remaining 3 games of this run of 5 away from home. Dunn will miss those. Then the final 2 non-conference games at home against Eastern Kentucky and Sam Houston. And then the first 2 ACC games also at home, Cal and Stanford. Now, that's if it goes exactly 6 weeks. If it goes exactly 6 weeks from the surgery, which was on Monday, that would bring him back on Monday, January 6th. On Tuesday, January 7th, Pitt plays at Duke. So probably best case scenario, if he comes back right on that timeline. I guess the best case scenario is that he recovers even quicker and he's able to get back sooner than that. But if he comes back on that 6-week timeline, he's returning to face Duke in Durham on Tuesday, January 7th. Welcome back, Damian Dunn. That will be a heck of a way to return. Pitt's next game after that is the following Saturday when they face Louisville at home. They're in that sort of 2 games a week grind after that. They have, a couple weeks later, they have just 1 game. But anyway, that's sort of best case scenarios. You're looking at getting Damian Dunn back for, technically it would be the 4th game of Pitt's ACC schedule, but that's with that, weird orphan game at Virginia Tech here in a week or 2. And so it's really, the 3rd game of the full ACC schedule. They're going to play Cal and Stanford, and then if he comes back on that 6-week timetable, he's back for the trip to Duke. So that's what you're looking at. So, on a very basic level, you're asking yourself, what does Pitt need to do? How do they get through these next 7 games, at least 7 games, without Damian Dunn? Now, Damian Dunn is not this team's most important player. He wasn't their leading scorer. And as a matter of fact, right now, as it stands after 7 games, Damian Dunn is like 4th on the team in scoring. But that includes, of course, the Wisconsin game when he scored 0 points and played 2 minutes. It also includes the LSU game when he played 11 minutes. He was in foul trouble and then ultimately fouled out of that game and scored just 2 points. In the first 5 games of the season, Radford, Murray State, Gardner-Webb, West Virginia, VMI, Damian Dunn averaged better than 15 points per game. He was averaging 15.2, which is more than Jalen Lowe is averaging right now. Of course, Ishmael Leggett, Pitt's team leader, averaging 18 points per game. Lowe is averaging an even 15. Dunn through the first 5 games was averaging 15.2 and also seeing a ton of minutes. Right now, he is, is 21.9 minutes per game, which is actually the 6th highest average. So, behind all these other guys. But again, that includes the Wisconsin game when he played 2 minutes. In the first 6 games of the season, he averaged more than 25 minutes per game. And then that includes the LSU game when he only played 11. The first 5 games of the season, he averaged 28 minutes per game. So you're looking at a guy who is going to give you 25 to 30 minutes every game and probably, on average, 10 to 15 points. That's a lot to make up. That's a lot to make up on the minutes, and it's a lot to make up on the points. And I think, a lot of people have looked at it, and the first 2 names that have come to mind about who's going to need to step up or who's going to get the opportunities from Damian Dunn's absence, the first 2 names that come to mind are Brandon Cummings and Amzal Delilich. When you take Dunn out of the equation, your 3-guard lineup is now down to 2, which is leaving an opening there of someone to play with Jalen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett. Between those 2 guys and the 2 centers, Guillermo Diaz-Cram and Cam Corrin. And so Cummings as the 3rd guard or Delilich as a small forward wing, both sort of slide in there. But I think what the first question to ask, what the really interesting question to me at least, and it's interesting for a few reasons, is what does the starting lineup look like? Once you take once you take Dunn out of the starting lineup, which he's been in the starting lineup all season. He started every game this season for Pitt, not counting the exhibition game. He didn't start that one, which is notable. What happens to the starting lineup? Probably the obvious option is Zack Austin moves back in. Zack Austin started the exhibition game against who they played, Point Park. But then when they started the second half of that game, Damian Dunn was in the lineup and Zack Austin was coming off the bench. And Jeff Capel likes to use his original starting lineup to open the second half. It's very rare that he comes out to open the second half without with any kind of like adjustment or something like that. Usually he goes back to his original starting 5. And that was what's interesting about that exhibition game. Zack Austin started the game. Damian Dunn started the second half. Now in this game on Sunday, when Dunn got hurt, or after Dunn got hurt, Zack Austin was the obvious sub who came in 2 minutes and 12 seconds into the game and played, a lot of minutes, ended up playing 29 minutes, which I think was his most of any game this season. But more notably, when they came out in the second half, Austin was in the lineup to open the second half. So it would seem like that's the obvious answer there. But even that is kind of interesting to me because I look at it and I really like the role that Zack Austin had carved out for himself. And I go back and forth, and I always have gone back and forth about the idea of the spark guy coming off the bench, whether it was Ashton Gibbs back in the day or Nike Sabandi more recently or Ishmael Leggett last year. I kind of look at it like, first of all, it sort of doesn't matter who starts. It's who plays the minutes and who's playing the minutes in crucial time. If you have a guy coming off your bench and he's averaging more minutes per game than a guy who's starting, it's the old John DeGroat thing, right? Where, John DeGroat was a starter, and at the first media timeout and sometime sooner, he was out of the lineup, and that was about the extent of the 6 minutes he would get in the game. And so, he was a starter, but did it matter when the 6th man was playing more minutes than he was? And so I go back and forth about whether it matters. I go back and forth about the idea of the spark guy coming off the bench. What's more interesting to me about Zack Austin and whether he's in the starting lineup or not is the role he has carved out this year. And I'm hoping we'll get an opportunity to talk to Jeff Capel today. I hope to be able to make it over for that later this afternoon because I'm curious about how Capel sees Austin's role this year. And if it's different from what they asked him to do last year, because I got to be honest, I really like how Zack Austin's playing this year. I really do. I think he's being the most Zack Austin possible, if that makes any sense. And his numbers, what's he averaging? 6.6 points and 3.4 rebounds per game. That's, whatever. It's It's fine. Nothing exceptional. It's fine for a guy coming off the bench, but it's what he's bringing, with occasional timely scoring, and obviously on the defensive end, how much does he have? 15 blocks? 15 blocks through 7 games, which is a nice average. He's averaging better than 2 blocks per game. I actually thought that was a lot, and there are guys with like 22 or even more blocks so far this season in the nationally. But like he's blocking the shots, and then our guy Steven Gertz pointed this out as well, and I thought it was a great point that even when Zack Austin's not blocking shots, like the threat of Zack Austin is enough to cause offensive players on the other team, or cause opposing players to adjust their approach to the basket, because he's out there. He's a shark out there, floating around in the waters, and you have to be careful when you go to the rim, or you have to be careful when you attempt a shot, because he might come out of nowhere and bite your leg off, or block the shot. We learned a new one from Rasheem Biles, the Pitt linebacker, one of the original Sharks, yesterday. He said that Jeremiah Marcelin, the freshman linebacker, had said that he eats the opponent's face. Now, I don't know if I'm going to say that Zack Austin eats opponents' faces, but I will say that he is a bit of a basketball version of a shark, always kind of lurking out there, ready to send a shot into the zoo, so to speak. And so I think that's had such a huge effect. Now, whether that changes with him in the starting lineup, I couldn't say. Maybe the way he's been playing, because I feel like a lot, for the most part, what we've seen through at least the first 6 games this season, not so much this game on Sunday because Dunn went out in the first 3 minutes. What we've seen is that first sub comes in, provided it's not due to foul trouble with one of the centers. But that first sub comes in, and it's Austin, and he comes in. Actually, forget what I just said about the foul trouble with the centers. Austin comes in and replaces one of the centers. That's been sort of the substitution pattern. Zack Austin, first sub off the bench, usually around the first media timeout, not necessarily replacing one of the guards, not coming in for Damian Dunn or Ishmael Leggett, certainly, but coming in and then Cam Corrin taking a seat, or Guillermo Diaz-Graham taking a seat, and Austin playing sort of that 4. Now, he's played with both centers on the court. He's played with only one center on the court. There was even 1 or 2 lineups we've seen where he was the center on the court. So he's played in different roles, but he's gotten a lot of time there. I think you're going to see less of that. Well, I think you could see less of that now. Now, if he has to move into the starting lineup. Of course, it is relevant to consider what's going to happen with Cummings and Delilich and how they're going to play now and how they're going to be used. Delilich certainly got a ton of minutes. I think he had 16 minutes against Wisconsin. Cummings played 18 minutes against Wisconsin. There were some interesting lineups. Brandon Cummings almost always on the court with 2 other guards, although he spent a little bit of time. He spent about 30 seconds in the first half just playing with Jalen Lowe, and then he spent about a minute and a half in the first, right after that, just playing with Ishmael Leggett. I don't think they did that at all in the second half. I had all the legal pad. The legal pad had to come out. I have all the lineups written down and how much time they played. These ones that I have dots on. So these 2 dots right here, as you can see, this is the opening game starting lineup, or that was the lineup they went to as soon as Dunn got hurt, where they brought Leggett or Austin in. This dot right down here is the opening second half lineup, where probably the most clear indication we have of what Jeff Capel is going to do with his starting lineup going forward. This dot down here, I thought was an interesting lineup, and they used it for about 1 minute and 20 seconds. Jalen Lowe, Amsal Delilich, Zack Austin, Guillermo Diaz-Graham, Cam Corrin. I didn't look to see what happened with that lineup on the court. That was from the 9:15 mark to the 7:57 mark of the second half, but I thought that was pretty interesting. But Cummings and Delilich saw a lot of time, saw a lot of minutes. I think Cummings, not as much in the second half. I wanted to bring up the second half stats. Yeah, Cummings only played 3 minutes in the second half, whereas Delilich was really the guy who saw the most time. Zack Austin played 19 minutes in the second half, so he saw the most time in the second half as a result of Dunn's injury. But Delilich really getting all of those minutes, getting 12 minutes in the second half. He was a -4, but everybody was a minus in the second half. Delilich shot 3 of 3 from the floor. He made a three-pointer, grabbed an offensive rebound. He had an assist, a foul, and a turnover, and scored 7 points in that second half. Look, you guys know what I think about Amsal Delilich. You know how much I've been hyping him up and excited for him and looking forward to see him. I mean, like, this is going to be a big opportunity for him. It's going to be a big opportunity for him and a big opportunity for Brandon Cummings. I like what I've seen out of both guys so far. And I don't really feel like backing off of any of the hype for Delilich, because I think there are plenty of signs that hype was warranted. It hasn't been a complete and total, smashing success on arrival, but I'll chalk that up to the injury and the time that he missed, and he's still getting settled in and getting comfortable in NCAA college basketball. I think Brandon Cummings has also been further ahead than I expected him to be, and further ahead than a lot of freshmen often are. And he seems like he's holding his own. And these guys are they're gonna find out on the court, and they're gonna grow on the court, and they're gonna develop on the court. I think they're two very, very talented basketball players, and sometimes experience is the best teacher, right? Sometimes the best way to get acclimated to the college game is by playing the college game. And for at least the next 7 games, Amsal Delilich and Brandon Cummings are going to be playing the college game, and they're going to, baptism by fire. You're not in a ballroom in West Virginia anymore, boys. You're going to Columbus, you're going to Starkville, and you're going to Blacksburg. 3 games in a row, on the road, not in a neutral court, not in a hotel ballroom. You're going to have a real locker room. You're not going to change into your uniforms in your hotel room and take the elevator down. But you're going to be playing in front of a hostile crowd at Ohio State, at Mississippi State, at Virginia Tech. Welcome to the show, right? This is the opportunity. So, who picks up the slack here? This is a big question. And it's on both ends of the court, because I think Damian Dunn, as much as they're going to miss his offense, and like I say, the first 5 games of the season, he averaged more than 15 points per game. Even now, he's averaging, I forget what the average is down because of the time that he missed in this last game, but he's still averaging 11 points per game. That 10 to 15 point range, you need to make that up. You're going to have to find a way to make that up, and that's not going to be easy. You can expect Jalen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett to produce a little bit more, but I think the bulk of those extra 11 points or 12 points or 13, 10 to 15 points you're going to have to get them from Brandon Cummings, Amsal Delilich, and Zack Austin. Those 3 guys are going to have to elevate their scoring. I'd like to say, I think Guillermo Diaz-Graham's scoring is going to come up, because I don't think he's going to keep shooting the way he's been shooting. I think he's getting great shots, but he's shooting 26.7% from 3. He's 8 of 30 so far. He has actually attempted the second most 3-pointers on the team, second only to Jalen Lowe, who's also shooting sub 30%. As we look at this team going forward and their offensive production, with or without Damian Dunn, I think the scoring will go up, because I don't think Jalen Lowe and Guillermo Diaz-Graham are going to be sub 30% all season long. Those guys are better shooters than that. We know they're better shooters than that. We've seen them shoot better than that, and they're getting good shots. They're not shooting sub 30% because they're firing up terrible shots. They're getting good looks, and they're getting the kind of looks that we know those guys can make. And so just that alone, Lowe and Diaz-Graham just shooting a little better, making a reasonable amount of the open shots that they're getting, that is going to improve the scoring and help make up some of those points you're losing with Dunn right now. But for the most part, I think you're looking for bigger roles out of Delilich and Cummings, and you're looking for Austin to contribute a little bit more offensively. Now, I've talked since last year about the Zack Austin chaos points, and what's real is, how he doesn't really seem to get his points in the course of the offense. It's the offensive rebounds and the putbacks and the transition and the fast breaks and all those things. That's where Zack Austin produces the most. You're probably going to have to incorporate him into the half court a little bit more. But you're still, I think, most of the offense from Zack Austin are going to be those sort of chaos points. But those are the guys that are going to have to pick up the slack a little bit. Defensively, I think that's a pretty interesting one. There's still good defenders on this team, on-ball defenders. I think Zack Austin and Ishmael Leggett are very good on-ball defenders. Damian Dunn was a very good on-ball. Damian Dunn was good on and off the ball. Austin and Leggett are going to have to keep playing at a high level as they have. And if a team has 3 legit scoring threats on the wing or on the perimeter, like Jalen Lowe is going to have to step up his defensive performance. It was too easy for Wisconsin when they got their big scorer switched onto Lowe. It was almost too easy to do that, and I think Pitt tried to stay out of those situations. But Zack Austin and Ishmael Leggett are going to have to carry an even bigger piece of the load, and Jalen Lowe is going to have to step up his defensive game. I think he's gotten better. I think he's better this year than he was a year ago, but he's going to have to improve. And Austin is going to have to be a consistent on-ball defender, off-ball defender, in addition to going after the blocks, which he's done so well so far this season. So this team can survive without Damian Dunn. I think if you had asked me to list a couple of guys that I thought would, who I thought would hurt the most if Pitt lost them for a little while, I mean, I think Lowe and Leggett are obviously at the top of that list. Dunn might be 3. Although I think you could have a real debate about Dunn versus Corrin versus Guillermo. So I would not say Dunn was in the top 2 of can't lose guys. So that's an upside. You're keeping, your 2 most important players, but there is going to be some slack that needs to be picked up. I think if Pitt played Wisconsin 10 times with or without Damian Dunn, I don't think Wisconsin wins like 9 out of those 10 or something like that. I don't think Wisconsin was that much better than Pitt. That game was there for the taking. And somebody made an interesting point on the message board. If Damian Dunn gets hurt in like practice or the walkthrough or the LSU game or something, maybe even then the outcome's different because they're able to plan for it differently and prepare for it differently. But, I don't know if that changes anything with the foul trouble and some of the other issues Pitt ran into excuse me, in that game. So, I don't. It's not like they got blown out against Wisconsin without Damian Dunn. I don't know if it drastically changes my outlook on what I think their chances are at Ohio State and at Mississippi State and at Virginia Tech. I thought those games were going to be challenging but winnable. And people always say that we'll find out what this team really is. Well, yeah, the next 3 games actually we will find out a lot about this team. I usually push back against that kind of thing. Not going to find out. They're playing 30 games. We'll find out over the course of 30 games. Well, the next 3 are going to be very telling about who this team is, where they're at, what their makeup is like, and whether Lowe and Leggett can continue leading this team, if they can fill in some of the defensive gaps that they're losing without Dunn, and if Lowe and Guillermo Diaz-Graham can start knocking down shots a little bit more. Some of the open looks that they're getting. They're getting great looks. They got to knock them down. I'm excited to see what it brings. I'll be honest with you. You know how much I've hyped up Delilich. Obviously, like Cummings a lot. I think those 2 guys, I'm excited to see what they do with a bigger role. Like, this is your opportunity now. And I think they're going to be, I think they are very good players, and they're going to get a chance to show it. The other thing that's very good is homefieldapparel.com. I don't know if you know about this. We always give you a promo code to get you 15% off at Homefield. No. This week, okay? This week for Black Friday, this deal runs through next Tuesday. You can get 30% off like everything on the site. I'm coughing because I can't believe this deal. With the promo code BFCM24. I don't know why. I don't know what that means. But the promo code is BFCM24. Okay? With that promo code BFCM24, you get 30% off the entire site at homefieldapparel.com. Look, the holiday season is coming up. You need gifts for the Pitt fan in your life, and there's nothing better than the stuff they have at Homefield. Go check it out at homefieldapparel.com. Write this down, BFCM24, and get 30% off the entire site. Not just 1 or 2 things, not just their sale items, the entire site. homefieldapparel.com. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe. We will be live tonight for the Panther-Lair show right around the time of the basketball or the volleyball game as well. A huge one for the Pitt volleyball team playing at Louisville tonight. We'll be keeping an eye on that when we go live at 8:30. So make sure you tune in right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com and check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com for all the Pitt sports news you can possibly handle. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Hope your week's going great so far. Enjoy your Wednesday. It's the biggest party night of the year, so make sure you tune into the live stream right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.